My name is Tom Rainsford. I'm the brand director and culture director and one of the founders of giffgaff. So thank you very much for coming to Uxbridge. I'm going to give you a 5-minute sort of history of why we're here and why we do what we do, because the world doesn't actually need any more mobile networks. We have by far enough. So you've got to have a pretty strong rationale for existing. So this is a T-Mobile store in Manchester in 2009. And this isn't set up in any way. This is filmed by someone on their BlackBerry, lol, if you remember Blackberries, outside. And basically the story goes like this. This fella went into the store and said, I'd quite like to change my contract, like he wanted to pay less or get more minutes or something like that. And the guy in the store here said, oh, you can't do that because you've got 6 months or a year left on your contract. It's fair to say that news went down quite badly. And he decided to take out his frustration on the store, which is not ideal, really, is it? The police do come in later and arrest him. And in a bit, it's quite a long video, we won't watch it all. In a bit, there's a bucket, you know in stores where you go in and they recycle batteries and you put them in a little bucket. He smashes that up, which is a bit like killing a polar bear, really, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? They're there to be recycled. So that's a bit mean. So this is an extreme example of the relationship that people have with their mobile networks. There goes the batteries. Look, if you take anything away today, if you smash up a store, leave the batteries, all right? It's really mean. So here's a weird thing, because we all have a relationship with our phone. We love what they can do. We're addicted to them. We love like looking on Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and texting mates and whatever else, right? But yet we don't really have a relationship with our mobile provider at all. It's a bit like energy or many other sectors. And we sort of said, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't feel right. You're paying £10 or £30 or £60 or £80 per month to these people, right? You should have some kind of relationship with them. So we decided that there's a few things that are wrong with the mobile industry. And we wanted to change that. We wanted to be the David versus Goliath of the mobile industry. And one thing that is really, really bad about the mobile industry is contracts, right? In a world where there's less contracts, people are getting married later, buying houses later. Yes, there's social and economic reasons for that, but people aren't tying themselves down. But the mobile industry loves to tie you down. And 24 months is a really long time when you smash your phone. I've smashed my phone twice, this is one example, on 2 different hen dos in Bristol. If you go to a hen do in Bristol, leave your phone in the hotel room. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen to it. And you don't want to do that, right? So hen dos in Bristol, massive takeaway, leave the phone in the hotel room, all right? So if you do that, you'll be all right. So we said, okay, well maybe knowing what's wrong with the mobile industry, I never do that, Knowing what's wrong with the mobile industry, maybe we can do some things to make it better. So this is the original book that the idea of giffgaff was written down into. And giffgaff is an old Gaelic word that means mutual giving. So you do something for us, we do something for you. And that's where the whole mobile network run by you came from, because we believe with people and with the power of people, we can do something different and something better. Because if you don't innovate, bad things happen. So when we launched in 2009, and it's very ironic that we moved to a building with a closed Blockbuster opposite, right? What a lovely prop. I hope it stays that way. It looks like it has for a while. When we launched in 2009, Blockbuster was like the #1 place in the world to go and hire movies from, right? In 2019, leaving your house to peruse a limited number of titles, right, which always took an hour, and then you have to go home, and you have to watch it that night, and then take it back the next day, because otherwise you'll get fined. That was an experience that we were all happy to do, right? But in 2019, that seems completely mental, right? Like even finding the controller to put on Netflix seems a bit of a liberty, right? And we're all now doing it by voice, because we just can't be asked to use our fingers. Weird, really weird. Anyway, Blockbuster didn't innovate and they died. So we believe that with the power of people and our community and involving members in what we do in our business, we can make a difference. And we launched in 2009, we had 14 people, it was a tiny office, we now have more people working for us, but that ideology stays true, and that's why we exist. So, Chris is going to talk to us more about what that means from a technology perspective.
Okay, so continuous delivery is what I'll talk about, because it's something that we have been working on quite a lot over the last few months, but it's the culmination of a few years' effort. So actually, although I'm head of product engineering now, I wasn't when I first joined. Actually joined almost 5 years ago now, and I'm going to take you a little bit back to that. So when I joined, I was working for the awesome Renu Norden and Steve Sweels, both of who it's nice to see here today. So one of the first things when I joined as a Scrum Master I was asked to do was take a little step back and a look at our Agile implementation and talk to our leadership team about it. So this was from the original deck. Hopefully my presentation skills have improved a little bit in the last few years. 23rd of October 2014, there were a few key points that I was trying to get across to the leadership team at that point in time. One of them was around this, because this is how they saw our use of Agile. It was that crazy thing that the devs did. It's nothing to do with the rest of us, it's just a development practice. And I was trying to convince them that this cycle that we follow every 2 weeks, analysing, designing, developing, testing and deploying software, wasn't Agile, truly. It's actually part of a much bigger cycle. So actually it's just a small part of the product cycle where we plan, build, launch, measure and adapt our products to the needs of our members. And one of the key things that attracted me to giffgaff was our strapline, the mobile network run by you. So actually we involve our members, as Tom was saying, in everything we do and every decision we make. And that really appealed to me as an Agile fanboy. I was a Scrum boy actually. And I was also asked, can you talk to the leadership team about what is it that makes Scrum successful or Agile successful? And I was actually just trying to challenge their thinking a little bit. So what I said was, well, the places that I've worked previously in sort of Agile type roles doesn't always work for a good reason, I think. But this was my formula. We want a reduction in top-down control. We want an increase in empowerment for the teams. We want better communication and collaboration across the board. And I like that to all be underpinned by what I always call the 3 T's of truth, trust and transparency. Challenge has always been, as I've seen it, cultural change. And the question I put to the leadership team at the time is, are you prepared to make cultural change if cultural change is necessary? But I think we agreed that actually culture-wise, we're in a good spot and we felt that Agile is the perfect methodology for us. The good thing from my point of view is we got a great deal of buy-in on Scrum, and I was asked to help with a business transformation to change the way we worked as a business, because let's move on to disrupting our teams. This is roughly what I walked into at giffgaff. We had the mafia, the business at the top. We had what I'd probably call a delivery manager, although we did call him a product owner, sat in the middle, Scrum Master, and an operations team. And we kind of broken ourselves into 2 giant teams, a big back-end team, big front-end team, and I guess kind of Conway's law, that actually reflects in our code base. We've actually got a monolithic PHP tier and a monolithic Java tier that we're currently still fighting against. So obviously the first thing we did was sort of take a step back, try and understand what our product set was, how can we break that into smaller chunks, and we have continually been disrupting our team since then. So we had product owner, notice the quotes, Scrum Masters, a mixture of devs, so nice and cross-functional, ops still siloed. Now just a product owner, so it's getting a bit better because there was now more ownership of a product coming into the teams. We're looking at having software engineers rather than having siloed different functions. We'd like everybody to be full stack and sort of T-shaped where possible. And we've started to bring our ops guys into the teams, and going forwards from that, actually very recently we've now transformed it so that we've got true product ownership, Scrum Masters in every team, we have DevOps engineers who are fully integrated, and we're starting integrating business intelligence, user experience and other subject matter experts within the teams so we can have truly independent units. So that disruption's continued. So disrupting our code. So this is what the business saw when we talked about our code. Beautiful. I called it Lego this morning, and my wife corrected me and said, it's Duplo. Okay, right. So this is Duplo. This is my children's Duplo, which I labelled up for a session we ran a couple of years ago. This is how the business saw our portal, our website. But unfortunately, this is what the developers saw. I turned it round, and we got this lovely spaghetti mess of wiring, binding everything together, and we couldn't pull this stuff apart. So that's led us on to a disruption which is still ongoing, which is really about switching to microservices. I guess a lot of people are doing this now. It's seen as a better way for us to independently split up our code, because although we'd broken the teams up into small units, they weren't able to actually be agile because they couldn't separately deploy any of their code. They were throwing it all into a bucket. We were still tied into a 2-week delivery cycle. Everything had to be integrated at the last minute, tested in a lengthy regression test cycle, and that's just not agility for us. And where we want to be is somewhere a little bit different. So also off the back of this, we disrupted our environment, and I've got to credit Steve Sweels with some of this. So actually, we started looking at better ways to integrate our teams. In our previous office, one end of the office was all of the engineering guys, other end of the office was all the business guys, and never the twain shall meet. But actually, we experimented with mixing the teams up. We experimented wholly with the environment, use of standing desks, nice sort of comfortable seating areas, work where you want to, stand, sit, we don't care, mix it up. And it had a massive impact on our work experience and culture. And I think that's what you can now see reflected here. I think it had a huge impact on the whole design of this building. And if you get a chance to walk around a little bit later, you'll see that in action. So finally, disrupting our deployment. So CRUDSKI, this should be an industry acronym, I think, because it's awesome. And Steve McDonald, our Chief Operations and Technology, came up with this. And it's the capability to rapidly deploy small changes, both incrementally and iteratively. Okay? It's one thing we couldn't do. We were stuck in a 2-week delivery cycle, but actually we want to be able to build great features for our members. We want to get good feedback from our members as rapidly as we can. And without this capability, we weren't able to do it. So as I said, at the time, we were on a 2-week delivery cycle. We were regression testing, and it would possibly take 2, maybe 3 days every single 2 weeks, a lot of manual testing to verify the application before we launched it. And we could only launch it out of hours, 5 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. We'd get 10 people in the office. We'd take servers out. We'd deploy to it. We'd bring it back up again and make sure we were back online by 8. And that just wasn't working for us. So actually what we pitched to, again, the rest of the business was, we're losing a lot of time here. That time that we've actually spent on that regression testing cycle, if we could not do that, if we could deploy on demand whenever we wanted to, and we didn't have to go through that regression test cycle, we could potentially save ourselves a hell of a lot of man days, which could equate to 4 to 19 engineers a year, which is awesome. However, there was a cost, and the cost was the spaghetti of our code needs fixing. And the ask that we put to the business was, can we have some time, please? We asked for 6 months. Of course, we got 3. But 3 was good. What did we do with the 3 months? So this started last September. The big freeze, we actually called it Steve's big freeze. Steve wasn't very happy about that, but it was Steve's big freeze. And what did we do? Well, we stopped we had a great year last year. And we were able, as a business, to stop all feature development. We disbanded our product teams as they were, identify what the key problem areas were with our code base, and we did a Dragon's Den style pitches. So we actually went out to all the engineers and said, I'm going to sort out our end-to-end testing. This is what you'll learn by joining me, and this is what these are the sort of technologies we'll be working with. And then our engineers self-selected which teams they wanted to join in, and we did that 2 or 3 times over the month. So we focused on test automation. We got to modernize our legacy code, and we built a pipeline to production. So that brings us to the continuous deployment piece. So this is what we ended up with. So this enormous piece of toilet roll was in fact the full version of our deployment pipeline, which takes you from an engineer's machine right the way through to a multi-leg in-hours release into production. We do that every day now without fail at 10:30 a.m., but we can also do it on demand. And it's a big transformational change for us. So we think that's going to put us into a great spot for this year. So I guess in summary, this is how we used to build products. Relatively slowly, reliably. Actually releasing value to members every 2 weeks. For a lot of companies, they'll go, wow, that's awesome. Every 2 weeks, fantastic, we're happy, let's leave it there. Not good enough for us. So this is where we always want it to be, and this is what we've achieved. So we've now got the ability to build and at this speed, which is good, because ultimately this is all about the members, and it means that we can satisfy our members continuously. Okay, I think that's me, and I'll pass over to continuous disruption.
Hi, so I'm Rupert, I'm a Scrum Master here. So now we have continuous delivery. How do we translate that into continuous disruption? Well, first we need to answer the question, what does continuous disruption actually mean? And to me, that's delivering what our members want at pace. We now have the pace through continuous delivery. So how do we know what our members want? Well, as technology, we're working towards continuous delivery. The rest of our business was shaping itself to be ready for this capability and build what our members actually want. So I'm going to talk through a few changes that we made. The first one we made was new product teams again. And like Chris said, when we did the big freeze, we let engineers choose what work stream they wanted to be on, whether this was to brush up on old skills or learn new ones. And so we saw a massive spike in energy and engagement across technology when we did this. However, this energy then started to dip in all teams but one. And the one team who maintained that high level of energy was one that had a clear vision and sense of purpose throughout the freeze. So when we set up our new product teams, not only did we let engineers choose what product they wanted to work on based on how passionate they were about those products, we also set up team charter sessions for the new team members to get to know each other, agree on positive behaviors they wanted to see in each other, to build towards that vision, and most importantly, agree on the vision that the team would have. We also did a bit of team building, but I'm not going to go into that. So how do we get these passionate product teams closer to our members? Well, the community engagement team in giffgaff set up a member panel, and we ended up with over 5,000 members who are now willing to give us feedback whenever we'd like to speak to them. So they've told us whether they'd like to do surveys or have phone calls with us, video calls, or even come into the office and give us feedback. So now that we have passionate product teams and loads of members that are willing to give us feedback, there's only one thing missing, and that's if you speak to members, it's really easy to find out their problems, but not always the solutions. And so you need to adopt an experimental mindset. And in January of this year, we had a week-long workshop with every product team on an experimental approach to product discovery. Jeff Gothelf came in for 2 days. He's the author of Lean UX and showed us his process. And then we spent the rest of the week applying this to real business problems. So what do? Well, we start with a user problem. Instead of focusing on a business problem, start with a user problem. If you solve a problem for a user, the business benefit will follow. Whereas if you start with a business problem, you might end up creating a user problem that doesn't actually exist. So from your user problem, you want to come up with some ideas and hypotheses, and these will be baked full of assumptions. And then you want to ask these two crucial questions. What's the most important thing we can learn next? And what's the quickest and easiest way to prove or disprove that? So a great example of this during the week was the member team who were looking at login success. And they were seeing a lot of people are failing to log into their accounts. And at the moment, you have to use your username. So they thought, well, why don't we let people use their email instead? I thought, oh, this is a great idea. So they looked at their assumptions. And one of the main assumptions was that people were struggling to log in because they couldn't remember their username. So we looked into this. And actually, that wasn't the problem at all. The problem was with the password. People weren't remembering their password because they don't log in regularly enough. So if you have a user problem and you come up with a bunch of ideas and you don't know what to go with, there's a great tool called a value matrix. So if your ideas are low value and high risk, then you definitely want to scrap this. If they're low value and low risk, still scrap it. You're never going to get round to doing this. There's always going to be stuff that's more valuable to do. If it's low risk and high value, then just build it. A great example of this is, again, the member team during that week. They came up with an idea to let members know when their caps lock was on, when they're entering their password. And so they built it in an afternoon and deployed it the very next morning. And the next day, they saw a 4% increase in login success. So this was great. However, actually, as the weeks went on, they realized that this was just a sort of statistical anomaly, and actually long-term, it didn't actually create many benefits, and so they took it back. But they were able to do that because it was a low-risk solution. So if something's high value and high risk, you want to experiment with this. This is where a business can get its most learnings. If you can disprove an idea in a week doing an experiment, it's a lot better than spending 3 months building that idea to find out nobody wants it. So what kind of experiments can you run? So this is the truth curve. It demonstrates the more effort or money you spend on an experiment should give you a stronger sense of evidence. So it should hold more true. So down the bottom end, we have chatting about what to do next. This is fantasy land. You're not learning anything about the problem or your members. You're just talking. So you don't want to spend much time there. You want to make a decision and do an experiment. Then there's goob, getting out of the building, chatting to people. Can be a really good way to disprove an idea really quickly. You could survey members. You could do a Wizard of Oz test. This is where you have a feature that looks and feels like a complete feature, but actually somebody's pulling strings behind the scenes. So a great example of this was Amazon when they were testing out the Echo. They had a box in a room with a speaker and a microphone inside it, and they wanted to see how people would interact with it. And in the room next door, there was an engineer with his laptop with Google open, listening to the questions getting asked, and Googling everything and replying. So it felt like the full experience, but there was nothing fancy there. Then there's a fake feature. So this is where you would maybe have a button to a feature that hasn't actually been built yet. So it might say, sign up to our newsletter. And you click the button, it says, sorry, we've not actually got our newsletter yet, but thanks for showing your interest. And there's A/B test, and then once you're really confident that you're actually going to build something your members want, just build it. I'm now going to show a really good example of a Wizard of Oz test, which was done during the workshop. So this is our CTO, and he's getting invited to do a click to action. So he's going to push a kitchen sponge with a bit of paper on it. And doing that, he's going to get a text to his phone with a link to what this team has learned during the week. And he's got no idea how it's been done. So with this experimental approach to solving our users' problems, community members and giffgaff pioneers who want to tell us the problems they're facing, passionate product teams with a sense of purpose and a clear vision that want to find out members' problems and the ideas that will solve them, and the capability to continuously deliver, we will be able to be continuously disruptive and be the mobile network truly run by you. Thank you.